Can you hear my tractor missing? One of the cylinders just isn't firing like it should be firing. If you have a Farmall H that's smoking like mine is, or if it's missing on one cylinder, then it might be time for an in-frame engine rebuild. That's what I'm going to do on this video, and you are welcome to follow along. At the end, you'll have the confidence to make this repair on your very own tractor. When a tractor misses, it doesn't automatically mean that it needs an engine rebuild. It could be other problems. There could be an issue with the distributor, it could be a stuck valve, a simple fouled spark plug, etc. Any of those reasons would be something that would cause a tractor to miss. However, I've done some diagnosing on my tractor and know that it does indeed need an engine rebuild. Here's how I know that. I pulled the spark plug from the number 4 cylinder, and you can see that there's oil on the end. That's not what I should see. If I replace the spark plugs in this tractor, they only last for about an hour's worth of use, and then they're fouling out again. I see oil coming out of my exhaust. All of those things, it smokes really bad. All of those things tell me that it needs to have an engine rebuild. The final diagnosis that I like to do is a compression test. Normally I would see between 110 and 120 pounds on the gauge. I only see about 40 to 50 pounds on this cylinder. So all of those things together give me the indication that this tractor does indeed need an engine rebuild. Behind me is a Farmall H. These techniques apply to a Farmall H, M, the Supers 300, 400, the 350, 450, any of those dry sleeved engines, not a wet sleeved engine like what you would see on an A, B, or C, but a dry sleeved engine, and we're going to do this engine rebuild in frame. So go ahead and follow along while we get to work. I'm pulling off my ground battery cable, and then I'm also going to reach in here and turn the fuel off. This is the very first thing that you should do when you make this repair on your tractor. Your live battery cable is right here next to the gas tank, so we don't want to have any accidents. Next, we can go ahead and pull the muffler off. This will just come off like so. Let me set that down. And on a hood, they have these little tabs here that you pull down and twist. There's 4 of them on the hood. You pull all these down, and then your hood will be ready to come off of the tractor. Disassembly on this side will include my manifold here. I'm going to leave my carburetor attached to my manifold, so the only screws I'm going to take out will be right here at the governor shaft. I'm going to take off my gas line and my choke shaft here, and then also these screws here, which will loosen up my air breather hose to come off to the side. There's 6 bolts back here on the manifold, so I'll take all 6 of those off. Work carefully when you take those off. Sometimes they'll be a little tight. You can use heat if you need to. So I'm going to take all that off, and this side of the engine will be disassembled. Here we go. Before disassembling this side of the engine, I did drain both my coolant and my engine oil. That's important to do before you do any of the steps up here. On this side, I'm going to take off the generator. First, I do have some labels, so I'm going to label these wires so that when I put my tractor back together, I can get it wired up correctly. Then there's 3 bolts on the generator in the brackets here. When I loosen those up, the generator will push forward, and then this belt will come off of the front. I'm going to pull off all of my spark plug wires and also the wire up here on my coil. Right here is the water temperature sensor, and I'm going to take this off. This is probably going to be the hardest thing on this side of the engine to remove. I've had these really be a problem in the past. Hopefully this one's loose and it comes off easily for me. Up here, this support bracket will need to be removed. There's 2 zip ties that hold these wires to the support bracket, so I'll snap those off, and then I'll remove both of the bolts on the support bracket, and we should be pretty well set on this side of the tractor. I'm pulling out both of these bolts and nuts for my tappet cover. There we go. The tappet cover will pull off with the steering shaft intact. You don't have to pull that off. It's kind of tight, but it comes off and it saves you a lot of work from pulling that steering shaft off. So with the cover off, we can see our rocker assembly here. The first thing I'm going to take off is this oil tube. This is a 1/2-inch wrench on here. This is a little tight on my left side here. The right side's a little easier to access, but this left side's kind of tight. You just got to move it a little bit at a time, but then that tube will come right off. I think it'll pull off. There we go. Okay, so there's my oil tube. Next, I'm going to take off all 4 of these bolts to free up my rocker assembly here. This one's 9/16. I'm going to take all 4 of these off, and then once I get my rocker assembly off, all of my push rods will just pull right up, and the next step will be to remove all of the head bolts. Now I'm ready to remove my thermostat housing. This is cast iron and lots of times they're really stuck on. There's 2 bolts here that bolt into the head. You'll need to remove both of those. And then we have a rubber hose up top and another rubber hose down at the bottom here, which we'll need to loosen up and kind of pull those off together in sequence and it'll come out. There we go, just like that. We have 2 last fittings on the head. One on the front is this one that comes from the governor, and then the other one up here comes from the air breather. Remove both of those fittings and then your head should be free to come up. If you need to, you can tap it with like a dead blow hammer if you need to loosen it up, but just be sure when you do lift it up that you lift straight up. Since you're coming through these bolts, you'll likely need some help lifting that off as it's heavy and you have to go straight up and then back because you're leaving the steering shaft on your tractor. So get some help, that's what I'm gonna do, and we'll take this head off. I'm taking the last few bolts off the bottom here of my oil pan. Got one more and then this will drop down. There we go. It's loose, so here it comes. I'm pounding this lock washer out of the way so that I can get a socket onto the bolt on the bottom of my engine here. So I'm going to take both of these off. And I'll do the same procedure on all 4 pistons down here. So loosen that one up. This one I already loosened up the lock washer, so we're ready to screw this right off. Seems like that one's really loose. Here we go. Let me pull these the rest of the way with my fingers so I can do both at the same time. Those washers kind of get hung up on. You got long threads on them because they're going all the way through the bottom there. Get this last one off and then we'll expose our bearing underneath here. Okay, see if that's loose enough to just come. Nope. So I have a rubber hammer here I'm gonna tap this with. Here we go, you can see it's moving. Just see if it'll come right down. There we go. So that's off. My next step is to get the piston out. So I'm gonna just use a piece of wood up here and I've got that all the way up and it's on the piston. Then I can drive it up through. It'll come all the way up to the top of the engine and I'll pull it the rest of the way out from the top. I'm gonna pull my piston out here and do a little bit of inspection. You can see my oil control ring on this side is completely broken. That is why the tractor is behaving the way that it was. All the more reason to do the in-frame overhaul. This is why it was burning oil, why it was fouling out spark plugs. So we definitely need to make some improvements on this motor. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the other 3 pistons. I'm ready to disassemble my piston. There's snap rings on each side of your wrist pin here. So you can just use a pair of needle nose pliers like that to pull it out. I already have the snap ring pulled out of my other side, so now I'm ready to drive this through. I'm using a socket here, and I'll just pound it all the way through there. My wrist pin fell on the floor, but it's out. Now my piston is loose. Some people will replace their pistons and their rings. That's what I'm going to do in this video because these pistons need to be replaced. But there will be an occasion when your pistons are okay and you can just replace only the rings. So if that's the case, you need to take the rings off of your piston and clean up all the carbon that's in the grooves there. So that would you only need to do this if you're going to reuse your pistons, but they just snap off like so. You can take all of them off, clean it up, and then you'll be ready to reuse your piston if you desire to do so. When you are ready to purchase parts for your tractor, you can purchase them from my website. It's farmtractorrepair.com. Now there are a couple different options for the parts that you'll want to know about so that you can buy the right parts on the first try for your tractor. First is the oil filter. We offer either a short or a tall filter, and you need to know which one your tractor has and then order the correct one for your tractor. We also offer an oil filler cap. If you want to replace yours, you can if yours is damaged. Here we have a valve kit. A kit comes with the intake and exhaust valves, the guides, the springs, and the keepers. That's all together in a kit. Now there are a couple different head options for your tractor, so you need to read the head number and then order the appropriate kit. The valves came in different lengths, and if you order the wrong kit, the valves won't fit into your head. So it's really important that you read the head number before you order and choose the valve kit that you need. Now if you are going to replace the guides, you might want to purchase one of these tools. I spun this on a lathe. It's pretty simple. If you want to make one yourself, you can. But if you don't have a lathe and you want me to make one for you, I'd be happy to do so for the guides, which you'll see on the video how that is used. Back here we have lifters. These are sold as a set of 8 for your tractor if you want to replace your lifters. Here we have the overbore kit. This is pistons, sleeves, and the rings all come together as a kit. Now this is the 3 7/16 overbore kit. It's got a pop-up piston. It's going to add power to the tractor, and this is what I would recommend to you. If you, however, only want to purchase rings and put those on your pistons, as long as you measure your pistons and know what size you need, we can send just the rings apart from an entire kit. We can also offer one of these sleeves in this size as well if you need an individual sleeve for the 3 7/16 size in case you break one putting one in. Over here we have main bearings. Again, those are available in different sizes, as well as the rod bearings depending on what size you need for your tractor. We have brand new spark plugs. We also have the wrist pin bushings for your bearings here. Up here we have the plug for the block, and then this is the oil level for your pan if you need to replace that. Here's a new lock tab if you need some of those. That's definitely something I replace every single time that I put those into the engine. Next we have the manifold here. This is a brand new manifold and it's really top quality. It comes with a new pipe and the gaskets all are together when you purchase the brand new manifold. So if you realize that yours is damaged when you take it off, definitely consider replacing the manifold. It'll make a difference on the way that your tractor runs. You have a couple different options when you want to buy gaskets. The first displayed here is a full gasket set. That's from my arm over is everything that's in the full gasket set. If you want to do a lot of work on your tractor, then buying the full gasket set will save you money in the long run. However, if you're only going to do a little bit of repair on your tractor, you can purchase some of these components individually. You can purchase just the oil pan gasket individually. You can purchase just the front seal on its own. Over here we have the rear main seal that you can buy individually, or we have a head gasket set, which comes with all of these gaskets displayed here. So you have some different options. It just depends on how much work you want to do on your own tractor. Also, if you want to do more work than what this video outlines, you might want to purchase a manual like this one. This covers the H and the M, the Cub, A, B, C, so many Farmall models, and it has a lot of specs in it that will help you out if you're doing repair and follow a manual easily. Or if you do better with instruction on video, we do offer this video which covers a complete engine rebuild, taking it down to the bare block. It's going to show a lot more steps than what this video here shows. We also have a tune-up video and a torque amplifier repair. So if your tractor is equipped with TA and you need to repair it, this video will help you through those steps. All of these parts are available on my website. It's farmtractorrepair.com. When you purchase the parts on my site, it helps to fund future tractor tutorials. I'm ready to pull the old sleeves out of my engine and put new ones in. In order to pull the sleeves, you do need a sleeve puller. Tool manufacturers make generic sleeve pullers that you can use if you have one in your shop, or if you don't have one, I have made a puck like this one that has 2 grooves on it so that it has either the 3/8 inch or 7/16 inch size, so that whether you're pulling out the original sleeves or sleeves that have already been replaced, you can get them out of the block. This is a very safe way to pull the sleeves out of the block without damaging the block. You don't want to use a chisel and a hammer and try to chip away at them, because then you run the risk of damaging the block, which you never want to do. So if you need a puller like this, I'm happy to make one for you and send it to you if you don't have the capabilities to make that in your own shop. So I have another one of these pucks underneath the engine, and then I have this 1/2 inch threaded rod through my puller. I got my parallels set up, so now I'm ready to just turn this, and the sleeve will come out. It's a little tight here at the beginning, but several turns around, it'll come all the way out. I already see that the sleeve is starting to move just a little bit at a time, so I'll keep turning this until it comes all the way out. Okay. I'm going to release this here because I'm close. I'm just going to set these parallels down so that they don't fall. There we go. And you'll see my sleeve pulls right out. The next step is to clean the bore. You want to get all of that glaze off before we put new sleeves in. You can see how much buildup is left on the sleeve. That much buildup is inside the cylinder hole as well. So we're going to clean that up by using a hone. I have one set up on my cordless drill here. Now when I put this hone down into the hole, I'm careful that I don't go all the way down to touch the crank, because that'll break my tool. But I also want to clean the whole entire hole. So I'm very much thinking about how far into the hole I'm going. I'm going to turn my drill to go both directions so that I thoroughly clean the hole. In addition to cleaning the cylinder bore, I also want to clean this top lip right here, because that can have buildup as well. So I'll just use a screwdriver to scrape that off. Yeah, you can see there's some coming up there, and clean that very thoroughly. I also use a can of cleaner to spray it in there and dry it out. Clean is my secret to success. I want to make sure that this is fully prepared before I put my new sleeve in. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I just pulled my sleeve out of the freezer. I did that so that it will shrink up a little bit and slide down into my hole easier. So I'm gonna just set it down in here. I'm gonna push it as far as I can by hand, because I wanna make sure that it gets started straight. Move it down in there, and then I'll go ahead and put my puller on. I'm gonna use it for installation. And then notice that I'm using a rubber mallet here to drive it all the way down. I'm going to drive it until it's flush. Very good. I just heard it bottom out, and I can see that my sleeve is flush across here. When you're working with a frozen sleeve, be careful. They do become fragile once they're cold. That's why I like to use this puller right at the top, and I'll put it in there because it fits and it's the right size, and then I use a weighted dead blow hammer like this one, because I don't want to damage the sleeve or the block at all. It's definitely my preference to install a sleeve in this manner, and I would recommend the same for you. Now let's talk about the rods. The first thing you want to inspect on the end is your wrist pin bushings. You can put your new wrist pin in. It needs to fit snugly like mine do. My wrist pins are fine, so I'm going to use them as they are. However, if when you put your wrist pin in, you realize that your bushing is sloppy, you definitely need to replace it. We offer these new wrist pin bushings. Normally this is a repair that you would have done at a machine shop. Most people don't have the tools needed to do it inside their shop. You have to to press it in and then ream it out since it'll mushroom over when you put it in there. But if you need new wrist pin bushings, you could purchase the bushings from us and take them to your machine shop. It'd be a little easier on the machine shop so they don't have to try to find the wrist pins that will fit your rods here. So inspect your wrist pin bushings, replace them if needed. If not, just move on like I am. Now I'm ready to assemble the piston onto the rod. Notice that on the rods, there's always a number. They should have a full set of 1, 2, 3, 4. This is number 2 and it's gonna go in the number 2 hole. It's best to have a complete set of 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1's always closest to the radiator. So I'm gonna tighten this into my vise here so that I can put the piston on. Notice how I flipped it around so that the number is gonna be cam side on the engine. Because I'm using these pop-up pistons, they are directional. See how it says front on it? I'm gonna turn the arrow so that the front is facing towards the front of my tractor, and then I have the number on the cam side. It is extremely important that you get your pistons going the right way. If you don't, when you put the head on and start running your tractor, you will do damage majorly. So I'm gonna slide my wrist pin through there, and then I have these 2 little clips that will go on both sides. Let me show you. I like to use a pair of pliers like this one that I can just get onto the very edge of it, just like that, until it's snapped into place. At this point, I'm going to talk about the rings. So I have all of my rings here ready to go. I'm going to start with my oil control set. See how it's split there? I'm just going to slide this one around with my fingers. That one goes on really easily. And then I have these 2 thinner ones, and they will go on the top and the bottom of my piston. So I'm just going to start it into place here. Let me get it in the groove. And then I'll just trace that all the way around, just like that. And then I'll do that same procedure on the bottom of that oil control ring. Slide it all the way around and snap it into place. Then I like to take the openings of the rings and separate them apart so that the openings are not on top of each other. So let me slide that groove around. There we go. And then my oil control ring set is ready to go. Your next rings are directional. Look for a dot. The dot always goes up towards the top. These ones are a little more fragile than the oil control rings I just put on. So I'm going to stretch this out, keeping my hand on the back so it doesn't fall into the groove. And then as it's stretched, I'm going to slide it all the way down right into place, just like that. And then I'm going to do that again one more time. Follow that same procedure, and then this top one goes on the ring right there. This one does not have a direction to it, only these 2 rings right here. Again, once I have them all on there, I'll rotate them around so that the openings do not line up. Our next step is to put new rod bearings onto the rod. Now, when you do this, you need to make sure that you get the right size rod bearings for your rod. Here's how you can tell. One way to tell is if I take my rods out and I see that my bearings are not worn, then I know that it's probably okay for me to put the same size bearings in that I took out. So I just use a screwdriver and I take this out by the lock. Oops, I thought I had it cleared up enough. I don't. And then I can look on the back and I can read the words standard right on STD, stands for standard. So I can put standard rod bearings back into my rods. However, if my rod bearings were worn, that might indicate to me that I need to go a step further and have my crank ground down a little bit. You don't want to have more than 0.02 of a difference. And then I would need to put a different size rod bearings into my tractor, whether that's 10, 20s, 30s. It's going to vary greatly depending on how much my engine has been used in the 60, 70 years that it has been around and been used. So I will show you when I get underneath the tractor how to measure your crank and make sure that you are getting the correct size. But until then, I'm going to put standards back into mine because I've already measured mine. I know that it takes standards and that's safe to go. So here's my new rod bearings. These rod bearings are sold individually. You don't buy them as a set of H. So drop this down into the groove a little bit more. There we go. That's secure. I'm going to do the same on my cap, and then when I assemble this together, I'm going to put lock to lock or match up the numbers. Again, this has a number 2 just like I showed you before. So it's gonna go lock to lock, number to number. Then I'm going to put the compressor on my piston and we're ready to drop it into the cylinder. At this point, I'm ready to drop the pistons into the cylinder. I turned the crank so that the journal is facing all the way down. When I drive my piston in, I don't want the rod to hit the journal and do any damage. So it's all the way down and out of the way. We'll deal with that when we button up the bottom of the engine. I also put a little bit of oil around the rings of my piston. That'll cause the tractor to smoke a little bit when it first starts, but it will prevent a dry start, and I'm more concerned about it starting dry than starting with a little bit of smoke. So with that, I'm ready to drive my piston all the way down into the hole. I've got my compressor on there, and I'm gonna drive it down just until it's flush. I'm using a micrometer to measure the journal on my crank. I see 2.247. That assures me again that I need standard rod bearings for this tractor because 2.2475 to 85 would be standard. If it's different, then you need 10s, 20s, 30s, etc. I'm putting a little bit of assembler's lube onto my rod bearing here, and I already put it on the other side before I drop the piston in there. Then here's my number, and my lock is gonna go lock to lock, number to number, right up there in the place. Then I have my new bolts here ready to go. Notice that I am using new tabs because my old ones were pretty beat up. So as I put my bolt on, I'm just gonna start it by hand. Let me get the other one started. I'm making sure that my tab stays towards the outside so that once I have these torqued, I can bend the lock tabs over. So next I'm going to tighten this up with a regular socket, and then I will tighten it up to torque spec for this engine is 40 foot-pounds of torque. Tighten both of them up and then bend the tabs over. Did you hear my torque wrench click there? That's for 40 pounds of torque. That's a spec for a Farmall H engine, but if you're working on a different engine, you need to read the book and find the specs for your own engine. Next, I'm just using this hammer to bend over the tab on my washer. I'm gonna do this on both sides. I'm ready to insert my oil pump with the gear on the end. This just drives right up, and you have to turn it a little bit to get it all the way in since it's gotta go past that groove, just like that. And then we got one bolt on each side. Oops. Tightening up the last bolt around my oil pan here, I took all the remains of the old gasket off, used a little bit of gasket sealer, and put my new gasket in, and the oil pan's on. Okay. I have my head over here on the bench. At this point, I'm gonna do the valves. So I'm going to just connect my valve compressor here to tighten up that spring. And I'm gonna take both of the keepers out. One on one side off, there's the other side, and then I'm going to release, and we'll have that retainer and the spring come off, and then I'll be able to get this valve off. There we go. I want to take a look at these valves when I take them out. I've already taken a few out of my head, and I have seen that they've been very damaged. I can tell that they were not sealing like they should have been sealing. Take this clip off and I'll show you what this valve looks like once I get it out. Now I'm ready to take my guides out. You'll need a tool like this one that inserts into the guide and allows you to drive them all of the way out. You do have to give it a pretty good whack here. There we go. My guide is out, just like that. I have my new guide in the freezer. I'm using that same trick that I used on the sleeves. I'm gonna use that tool again to just drive it in. Then I'm gonna reach down to the bottom and only drive the guide until it is flush inside there. So I got my other finger underneath. There we go, I like that. I'm flush underneath and my guide is into place. At this point, I'm ready to grind the seats. You can see how worn they are, and as a result, they had low compression on these cylinders. I'm going to use my valve seat grinder to clean this up. If you do not have a valve seat grinder like I do, you could purchase a hand set that takes a little longer but still does the same job and it's more affordable. Or if you want to take it to a machine shop, you could do that as well. There's professionals that will do just this step for you. If you are going to take it to a machine shop, I would recommend buying the valve kit and taking them the kit so that you're sure to have the right kit for your head. This is just a lineup tool that I'm going to insert in there to help me get it straight. And then I'll put this on here like that. And just a little bit at a time makes a big difference. You can see the dust coming off. There we go. That looks good. You can see that both of these are now ready for the new intake and exhaust valves to be inserted. I mushroomed over the end of my guide just a little bit when I was inserting the guides. They went in easily, so it wasn't significant, but it was just enough that my guides were tighter than I want them to be. These are my brand new guides. Notice how there's a larger and smaller. Your intake is larger, your exhaust is smaller, and this is intake, this is exhaust. So let me drop this around from behind just like that. And then I'm going to put my spring on. I'm going to use my compressor to tighten that up, and then I'll put both of my keepers on. So let me wrap this around here where it needs to be. And let me tighten this up. Looks like I'm a little crooked. There we go. I'm going to tighten that all the way. And then I have both of my keepers that will come on here. These are directional, and the wider end is up towards the top, the smaller end towards the bottom. You slide that around there, and I'm really controlling the tension on my compressor so that I don't pinch my fingers, because I do have that spring behind the retainer there. So I'm just gonna go very gently like that, and my keepers will stay in place. Beautiful. Okay, follow those same steps for all of your valves there. Right here I want to mention is the head number, C8776. You got to read this head number before you order your kit. My Farmall tractor had an X1 tag on the serial number, which normally means a gas head, but this is not a gas head. This is distillate, and I could have very easily ordered the wrong kit just by reading the tag from the outside of my tractor. So make sure you read this ID number, and then you can go ahead and order the correct valve kit for your head. I sprayed my head gasket with some copper coat, and I would recommend that you do the same as well. It just helps it get a really good seal. This head gasket is marked with up, so it helps you get it in the right direction, and this is a very high quality head gasket. There's different grades of head gaskets that you can buy. This is the top quality that we offer to you. I'm going to slide this down, and then I'll be ready to put the head on top. I'm tightening up my last head bolt there. You could hear the torque spec click. This is 70 pounds of torque for a H or W4 engine. It's 110 pounds if you're working on a Farmall M engine. Once those are all set, working from inside to outside, you can put your push rods in. These push rods are directional. This mushroom part goes towards the top with the smaller end down in the bottom, and you just drop these into all of the holes. My rocker assembly is ready to go on next. Notice that there's a tube here in the middle. I like to line up that tube first, right off the bat, and then set the rockers down into place. They all gotta line up here along the push rods and the valves. Everything's gotta be buttoned in, lined up, and then I'll tighten up all of these bolts across the top here. I'll use a 9/16 inch socket wrench for that. I'm ready to change my engine oil filter, so this bolt comes off of the top like that, and then I can use a rubber mallet to just kind of loosen up the canister. That canister's been on there a long time. It looks like it's been on there probably since the tractor was last painted. So my old filter comes out, and then I probably need to use a pick to get that little rubber O-ring out the bottom. If I damage it, it's okay because I got a new O-ring, but I definitely have to get the old one out of there. Did you see it come up? I have to get the old one out of there so I don't double up on the O-ring. Hopefully it'll come out here as one piece. Man, that has really been in there way too long. Okay, I have my new O-ring that will go in there, And then the filter is directional. See, the smaller portion goes towards the top. That just rests in there. And then I'll place my canister on top. I'm going to turn it so that the decal is facing out. And I'll tighten this back up in there. Next, I will add engine oil over here. And I'm going to put a new filler cap on the top of it. The manual would originally recommend a low ash 30 weight oil for this tractor. That was great back in the 1940s, but the modern equivalent for that oil is now just 1540 weight oil that you can put into your tractor. That's what I put in all of my old antique tractors like this model, and that's what I would recommend to you as well. So I'll put that in. Then I'm going to do spark plugs over here. When I take them out of the box, I like to just double check in the gap on the bottom. I'm looking for a 20 thousandths gap, which is what these are good at, but sometimes during shipping they can get a little damaged. So I just drop the spark plug in, I start it by hand, and then I tighten it up with a deep well socket. The next thing I'll do is hook up the electrical system on this side. I'll put my water temperature port through here, hook up everything, including the generator and the belt, so that this side is complete, and then I'll be ready to set the valves from the other side. When you're ready to set the valves, you do that when your cylinder is on the power stroke, meaning that both valves are closed like my number 2 cylinder is right now. I am going to set my valves at a gap of 17 thousandths, and I'm going to put my feeler gauge right in here to make it be the 17 thousandths that I want it to be. I make an adjustment to the gap. Back here, I have a jam nut right back here, so I can turn this to loosen it up. And then I can turn the head of the screwdriver head forward and back to open or close the gap. Once I have the gap set to where I want it to be, then I tighten up the jam nut the rest of the way. So you'll just use the feeler gauge and do that same procedure with every single valve. And this is a good place to start, but you will need to do it again probably about 20 hours after you've used this tractor a little bit. You'll want to run through and just double check your valves a second time. On this side, I'm ready to put my manifold on. You can see all the pieces that I have linked up here, including this throttle linkage that goes behind the manifold. That's way easier to put on now than later. So with that, I'm ready to lift my new manifold up into place. You can see that I have my gaskets there ready, and I did spray them with copper coat so that they'll seal really well. The manifold will rest there, and then I'll use the washers and bolts like I did before when I took the manifold off. I'll put the new carburetor into place and hook everything up down here for the next step. I'm pleased with how it runs. The next step we're going to do is to hook it up to the dyno and see how much horsepower we have increased with those power pistons in it. We got our dyno hooked up. Here we go. To let the tractor build its pressure. I love using a dyno. Okay, let's see what I had 400 pounds of pressure is what I saw on the gauge, and at the 540 mark, that equals about 30 horsepower, maybe 29.5 to 30 horsepower on our gauge. That is excellent. Stock horsepower on a Farmall H should be 24 horsepower, so you can see evidence of the difference that those pop-up pistons make. If you want a little bit of extra power in your H, this is an excellent way to do so, and I hope that these steps are helpful to you and it gives you the confidence to do a rebuild on your own tractor. When you're ready to buy parts, you can purchase them at my website. It's farmtractorrepair.com. Your purchase on my site will help to fund future tractor tutorials for you, and also consider subscribing to our channel as we release new videos all the time.